right, I'm Michelle Wheel, Chairperson of the Board of Library Trustees. We have a forum, so I'm calling the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. And since we are in person, I do not have to do the governor's advisory, nor do I have to take a roll call attendance.
How what?
This meeting's gonna go so fast.
Because you would be able to say that when I first moved governor.
I don't have a copy of the
It's not
appropriation from Governor Moore Healy yet, but as soon as I get that, I will be happy to read it that way. All right, so having got through the call to order and opening remarks, can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the December 13th meeting? So, thank you, Pat. Can I get a second on that?
Full second.
Thank you, Mitch. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? We all got the correctly updated version, a typo-less version of the minutes? Alrighty. So if there are no questions or concerns about it, all those in favor of accepting the minutes as submitted, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And still, I take that over. Move on to the appropriations report. Anyone have questions or concerns?
We obviously spent a little bit of money in the building maintenance item.
All on the HVAC.
Yeah.
And I just signed another quote for boiler repairs for another $1,800. The town administration is aware that we're having ongoing heating issues. It seems like the boiler kicks off and then Sean has to come out and work some magic to get it going again. So hopefully this next round of repairs will fix that problem so that it doesn't just get freezing cold in here. We've been able to catch it soon enough that we haven't had to close, and it is an easy fix, but a temporary one. So this should permanently fix it. Do I sound confident?
Why, yes, you do.
Do you have any, do you have any concerns about we've got to make the heating system work, so no argument for me on doing that, but obviously that put us over in what we expected for this year. Where do you expect to make up the difference? Does that concern you? Are we okay?
We should be okay.
Okay.
We do have, if you take out, we're going to spend materials money on materials. That's a state requirement. We don't want to touch that. There is money within this budget to cover most of it. If it goes too much over, then the town will have to talk about where that will come from. Whether it's some other line item in the budget. But Sean and John Kidder have been aware of it and we're all monitoring it. Right now, it's too far out from the end of the fiscal year to know if we're at risk of needing some other funding to keep up with it, but it's on the radar.
Do you anticipate any issues with utilities? No. You're going to have to cover that though.
I think we should have enough to cover it. It should be okay. It might be a little bit over because the cost of everything went so far up. Yeah. But we should be okay. Because we'll start to spend less.
Something like this get in spring.
Because we're only 16% on our fuel line, so don't be close. We will probably won't hit 100% on that.
Any other questions about appropriations? Here, none. Move on to the library director's report. Some of you took a minute to run up to the room where it happened to check out the new carpeting. Looks great.
It makes the other carpet look.
I hope it doesn't get charged.
It gets projects, right?
Do you have any questions?
I have a carpet question.
Sure.
Obviously we've done one room of carpet and you're getting the quote on the whole second floor, which is fantastic.
Actually,
the whole building, right.
Built broken into.
Yeah. In your report, you noted that the cost can vary greatly as to whether or not the bookshelves need to be moved. Totally understand why that's the case. You have to explain that. Is it conceivable that because are you planning to do squares for the rest of the building?
Yes.
Okay.
I really love how flexible the squares are and how easy it is to, like, the number of stains that we have now. If we had carpet squares, we would have just been able to almost replace them. And kind of makes the whole carpet last a little bit longer. That being said, upstairs will probably be that similar color to the where it happens. Downstairs, we could do something different in the children's room if we wanted to, with more, and we can play with color. And the nice thing about the squares is they're interchangeable. So if we wanted to throw splashes of color in the children's room while still having a neutral face.
So my question about the bookshelves is whether I'd like to think long term, and for example, if we replace all the carpet working around the bookshelves, but in 5 years or 10 years, while we still have the carpet, we want to move the bookshelves.
Yes.
The squares give us some flexibility there that I wonder if they could theoretically install around the bookshelves without moving them, but make sure we acquire enough spares that if we moved them, we could drop them into place at some point later.
Yes.
Great.
And we could do that.
Yep.
And I think the shelving that presents the biggest issue is that upstairs, the non-fiction and fiction shelves. Those are bolted to the floor. It would be difficult to move them, and also having been through a carpet replacement project where the books have to be moved off the shelf, it's such a nightmare. And it's actually like the carpet is done within a couple of days, and then it takes 6 weeks to put everything back in order. Any of the shelving that's smaller that could be moved, I would probably recommend doing that and just doing the carpet. So it would just be like a minimal amount of extra squares that we would need, just in case we ever want the option of taking those bookshelves down. Although they're bolted to the floor, and I don't know how, configuration-wise, there's only a limited number of options. So it would be like, maybe 5-10 years down the road, if we don't need as much shelf space, but we want more open space, and they were coming permanently, we would want the option. Just so that we're not painting ourselves in the corner. But also, I'd like to do as much of it as I can, so that we're not holding on to extra squares, because I'm already getting polite notes from the fire department not to hoard so much stuff. Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the reclassification project?
Sure. So currently we're using the Dewey Decimal classification system. I don't know how much I've talked about it with this group, but the classification system has its limitations in how things end up being ordered on the shelves. So first of all, it's a 7-number, it's a 7-digit number, which doesn't really translate into anything. But the biggest issue that we have is with some of the, for example, the religious section, 200 through 289, it's Christian religions or Judeo-Christian religions, and then 290 to 299 is literally everything else. There's no Dewey numbers for certain religions that have come up, or sections of religions that have kind of developed since the Dewey Decimal Classification System was developed. There's no Dewey number for things like apps, computer apps. There's technology, but within that, they really didn't build in room for mobile applications. So what you end up with is this like really long decimal. And there's like 3 shelves that are 001.05761. And shelving in that area becomes a nightmare. Finding books becomes difficult. It's not super flexible when it comes to, say we want to move all of our photography books with the computer applications that deal with photography, so Photoshop and things like that. It just becomes a really difficult, time-consuming process. And that's not to mention some of the social issues that are built into, I kind of referenced that with the religion. It's very heavy in favoritism towards certain outlooks and cultures, and doesn't reflect society today. So the system that we looked at probably 6 different ones, including some that librarians have developed within the last 10 years. And the bookstore model is the one that we're looking for, which is, we call it BISAC. I don't know what that acronym stands for. Not even gonna lie. It is a lot more flexible. You can actually submit subject headings to be added to the system. Whereas with Dewey, it takes years and years and years to change a problematic term. With BISAC, it takes about a month, usually. So it changes as language evolves, as our understanding and relationship with our language evolves. We find it to be more flexible, but it's a lot of work. So we've spent the last year kind of investigating, making sure that if we're going to do all this work, it needs to be worthwhile. It needs to increase the usability of the collection and not just be changing one problematic classification system for an equally problematic and unintelligible system. So we're pretty convinced that this is the one that will benefit the community the most. So our next plan is to come up with a concrete, actionable outline of how to do the work with volunteers and the existing staff without disrupting too much of the collection.
So is there a website that describes this bookstore model?
Yep. The entire classification system is on a website. And it's interactive. You can dig into it.
If I just Google bookstore model, I'll be able to find it.
Yes, and I can send out the link if you want to.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Now, does that mean you're going to have to change the spine labels on all the books as well? This is the phone for cataloging librarians.
Yes. So not only the spine labels, but the actual catalog, we have to change all of the call numbers within the computer system as well.
Well, that's the easy part.
Yeah. It probably takes about 1 to 2 minutes per book times however many books we have, which I think is 300 some 1,000. So we're going to start with the young adult section first, because the nonfiction is about 1 bay of shelving.
That's a good idea.
It's a couple $100. We're going to see how long it takes, see what did we not factor in, what assumptions may have been incorrect. Using volunteers, did we train them properly? Are the tasks that we've assigned to a volunteer correct? Things, you just work things out on a small scale before we go head first into the larger collections. That also gives us time to move those larger collections. You may not have noticed this because it is kind of it's more of an industry thing, but we've started weeding pretty heavily on at the beginning of the nonfiction. So if you go up to the nonfiction and the adult section, that first shelf is really what the collection will look like. The rest of the shelves are packed, overflowing. A lot of information there is very outdated. It's a shift in priorities for the collection. We're not holding on to as much, and we're really trying to keep a good core current collection. We're looking for there's a lot of books that have some slightly outdated terminology that reflect perspectives that are no longer current. So we're using this time to get rid of all the things that we wouldn't want to touch so that we're not doing work twice. It will keep everything flowing a little bit.
Now, when you do weeding, do you do it in consultation with other CWMR's libraries?
When we weed, the only consultation that we do with other libraries is if we have the last copy in the system, so that we're making sure we don't get rid of anything that's of value to other libraries as part of that shared networking agreement. So if that's the case and we're the only library that has something, there's a procedure in place where you send it out to the other 170 some odd libraries and you wait 10 days. If somebody wants it, then you just send it to them. And, because there are libraries that have a more archival space. And especially if something is of regional interest, those usually can find another home somewhere. And then after 10 days, if nobody wants it, then it comes out of the catalog and then they delete the record so that it's not, we don't have empty records in the system. The rest of it we use, there's an industry standard called the CREW method. So it gives libraries, this subject, if the books are 5 years old, or in this condition, or if there's something that supersedes it. So just industry guidelines for deciding how to get.
Because there are books that are 100 years old that we must retain.
Right.
For instance, the origins of species, we would not want to throw out.
Right.
So, we do have to be careful.
Yes. And there are some biographies and autobiographies that stay popular, that are on reading lists, or that contain core information to the subject that you don't want to get rid of. Right. And then we do have room for some regional interest topics. So we don't have a straight, like, if it's 10 years old, it's getting thrown away. If it's 10 years old, we're looking at it to see if it still has value to the collection. So religious texts, those are hundreds and hundreds of years old, but as long as the book itself is free of mildew and the spine isn't breaking, then we'll keep it on the shelf. And if it's starting to look old, then we might.
Thanks.
Sure.
Before we move on from, just to dive even deeper to this weeding issue, is the staff prepared for questions? People are like, how come all these books are disappearing from the library and now we're burning books and it becomes a thing? Look, just get in front of it. Anytime you talk about weeding out, I think you were heading that way with your questions too. Yep. To get even further in front of it, I'm assuming that there's been training, talking points, either for the staff, the community at large, that are ready to go if the question comes up.
And we try very hard to make sure that nothing goes in the dumpster. Not just our dumpster, but just in general.
Yeah.
If the book has value anywhere, we try to spend time finding its home. So the majority of our older books end up getting bought back by Baker and Taylor, which is one of our larger book sale vendors. So if it's worth something, they'll buy it back. We get credit for new books, and then I reorder. I did a huge weed down of our technology books because that's stuff that was just really hard. So I bought a bunch of new stuff and used those credits. So they buy them back and they resell them to more archival places. They may be profiting somewhat, but it's a book we don't want and we're getting something in return for it. They also, if there's no value to them for the book, they will take it and recycle it properly.
Okay.
There are very few books that go into this dumpster. Usually it's if there's visible mold, which happens sometimes. The book got wet, wasn't super terrible at the time, but when it sits on the shelf in the air, occasionally you'll open something and it's like, oh, this is no. But if Baker and Taylor can't take it, or if we have too much volume, if the friends, anytime the friends want something, they can have it. And sometimes Ellen does take some of our, sometimes the books just don't go out. So the book is not that old, and it's in beautiful condition. So Ellen will take it and she'll sell it and goes back to the friends. And then there's a couple of charitable organizations that take in bulk, just however many boxes in the book. So very few things are getting thrown away. And we do get those questions every once in a while. The majority of people who have noticed are like, wow, this shelf looks great. But, they're not even seeing what isn't there. They're only seeing, like, hey, these books look beautiful.
Because they can finally see them.
Yeah. But every once in a while, if we throw something away, we want to be mindful of how we're answering that question so people don't think that we're just wasting tax dollars.
So following up again on what Jocelyn was saying, is there a role for the trustees here moving forward? They have been cases where libraries undertaking projects like this and the public has become outraged and caused all kinds of problems. So is there a role for the trustees in backing you up, backing you and the staff up as you go through this process? And if there is, we need to be really well informed each step of the way as you do this, so that we can answer questions should we have to, in support of what you're doing.
Sure.
Can I just ask a question that might help with this?
Yeah.
Isn't leading on the collection part of the collection development policy? Thank you.
Yes. And we are being very careful, sort of to the point. A lot of the libraries that have gotten into kind of hot water with outrage from the community have rented open top dumpsters and have been throwing books into the dumpster, which symbolically is terrible. Right. There's just because somebody will go in and find those books that are still fine, that just kind of got mixed in with. So we're trying very hard not to create any kind of public backlash by being careless, which is why we do spend a lot of time, with careful consideration before something is discarded. What we're keeping and what we're repurchasing is almost as important as what we're getting rid of, because the library should represent a number of and all viewpoints, and so keeping an eye on quality of the collection and not leading to so much at one time that we have to throw stuff in a dumpster. I think will help mitigate any concerns. We really haven't had too many. The only concern I can ever remember here has been with audiobooks, and it was just somebody that used to work for Midwest Tape, and he was sort of lamenting the bygone era of CDs. So it wasn't even really a complaint so much, but yes, I think that helps with the public perception that we're not being careless. And,
If you could send us maybe some talking points.
Absolutely.
And then that way we'll be ready to, tackle.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions about anything on the director's report?
To have one staff training. We mentioned having a couple of staff development days. That means scheduled closure of the libraries.
So we don't open until noon on Monday, which gives us a half, the whole morning. So that's what I'm looking at right now, because it would avoid closing the library, which it's been so busy lately that it would be so hard to justify as nice as it would be to close at lunchtime, have lunch and then have an afternoon, like I can't really justify that when we do have this chunk of time set aside. So Monday morning is really what I'm aiming for.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do you like the topics that the staff has said that they're interested in learning more about? It's great that training is out there.
Yeah.
Are you excited that you're fully staffed?
Yes.
So it didn't feel like we were fully staffed last week. It's nice to, I don't have to look at resumes. This is not good. Resemblance.
All right. Anything else? Any other questions or comments? There are no questions or comments. We can move on to any new business. Does anyone have any new business they would like to bring up? Hooray. There being no new business to come before us, the date of the next meeting will be February 14th at 7 p.m. It will be a remote meeting because I think we really lucked out having good weather today, and I don't really want to poke the weather gods again. So,
Isn't that a holiday or something?
I was going to say, I will send you all chocolate.
I was going to say, we have cookies tonight.
Take the cupcakes home and free.
I would love if you would send chocolate.
You know you're getting chocolate.
you might show up. All right.
I'll take it.
Next meeting will be February 14th at 7 p.m. It will be a Zoom meeting. And if there is nothing else, the chair would invite or welcome a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you, Richard and Jocelyn. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting at 7:28 p.m. say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.